That was so funny, wasn't it? That was really funny. I'm like, wait, is that you right there? Oh, it was really funny. I think we're set.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hello, hello. Oops. Sorry. Let's begin with a prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Lord God, you astound us over and over again by the vast amount of things you put within our stewardship. Our very lives themselves, our resources, our time, the talents you give each one of us. And we certainly include within that list of resources this beautiful earth you have given us, which you also call us to include in our caretaking. We ask that you would bless our humble efforts, that you would give us perspective, that you would give us encouragement, and that most especially you would give us a spirit of gratitude for all that you have always first given us and for what we are called to share together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I think I'm going to need this. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you all here. I'm Denise Freeland, and on behalf of the Creation Care Ministry, I welcome you to this forum hour on making climate resolutions. We make resolutions for many other things in our lives, setting individual goals, taking actions that empower us. Why not climate resolutions? They may actually turn out to be very effective. Can you all hear me? Okay. Our forum, our goal today is to create a space for you to make your own climate resolutions, maybe hear what others are doing and be inspired by that, but develop some resolutions that speak to your heart, where you feel passionate. You will be the most effective working on actions that speak to your heart. But I often hear people say, what can I do? What can one individual do? And that's what we will be sharing together today. Individual actions do count, and be mindful that no action is too small, and choosing to do something does make a difference. Choosing to do nothing is not an option. You share with others, and you create a little concentric circle of what you're doing. They hear what you're doing, you share. It becomes contagious. You might think about it this way, that the word resolution means harmony. A climate resolution is you helping to restore the planet, bringing God's creation to a more harmonious state. Emmanuel's Creation Care Ministry is called to do this work through the Episcopal Church's covenant for the care of creation. I think most churches these days have a covenant for creation care, and this covenant serves as our guiding light here as we move forward with Emmanuel's projects. How this particular forum idea was born, I will share with you. My husband Paul and I went to Chautauqua Institution last summer because they had a climate-themed week, reconnecting with our natural world. The week featured an interfaith lecture series which included guest speakers ranging from Sally Jewell, the former Department of Interior Secretary, to Chief Oren Lyons, of the Onondaga Nation, one of the tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy. There were daily ecumenical worship services focusing on God's creation and emphasizing our human responsibility in taking care of it. There were even book discussions with authors including Fred Banson, who wrote Soil and Sacrament, a spiritual memoir of food and faith, and Robin Kimmerer, author of the best-selling book Braiding Sweetgrass. It was such a rich and inspiring experience. Like every day you were just, where do I go? There are so many things to attend. What of this basket of abundant offerings am I going to attend today? But hearing the stories, real stories of diverse communities and people coming together for the love of the planet in order to arrive at sustainable solutions was really an awesome experience. Solutions arise when the varied perspectives of our society are considered and included in all the conversations. Every speaker said, start talking with people about climate change, your hopes, your fears, your worries, all about it. Because when you do that, solutions arise when everyone is included in the conversation. Chautauqua was also very generous in offering up complimentary booklets for faith communities. So I have some of these here today, so before you go, please take a copy. It's a very condensed science explanation, but very readable, very understandable, and particularly the parts on storms. But the last chapter starts with, it's chapter 10, CO2 is a human problem with human solutions. The good news is that this climate solution is a human problem and has human solutions. So that is, we have also the world's littlest book on climate, only available through the Chautauqua Institution. 10 facts in 10 minutes about CO2. I have some here, and I can order more if more people want them. But it really helps to understand what's going on. And when you understand it, you begin to understand how you can take care of it. There's also an article here that was published in upstate New York, a newspaper there around the same time, how you can help the climate crisis. And it's got some tips in there. It's only the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, but it's got some things in here if you want to take away some things that you might not have thought of. So I would like to now turn over our forum hour to Martha Shimkin, and she'll be sharing her unique perspective and her wealth of knowledge about the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and then we will eventually get to making our own personal climate resolutions. Thank you.
So, let's just check and make sure you can hear me. I think probably so. So thanks to the Creation Care Committee for asking me to come and speak about the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed. And you think, well, why Chesapeake Bay if we're making climate resolutions? But we say that mostly what you can do is in your own backyard, or think globally, act locally. And little do you know, possibly, you are in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And so what you do impacts the bay. And I'm a little sick, so I'm staying back from everybody and wearing a mask. And my own Vanna is going to show you a map of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. You might not be able to see it close up, but the Chesapeake Bay watershed starts up in New York at the origin of the Susquehanna River and goes through Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. So for the most part, where we live, learn, play, work, and worship, we do that in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So it's just talking about the program for a moment. I'm the deputy director of this program. It's established by the Clean Water Act, Section 117, turns 40 years this year, so there's a lot of news that will come out about the Chesapeake Bay and its program. It's a partnership of all those 6 states and DC that I mentioned just before, as well as academic institutions, non-governmental organizations, and 13 active federal agencies. And so it's not just an EPA office where I work, but this whole broad partnership that we have. I have a budget that I administer of $150 million. That includes $50 million of infrastructure funds that came in last year and we have for 5 years. But the states put in over $1 billion to restore and protect the Bay. We have 3 key areas we work in: science, restoration, partnership. And the science is cutting-edge science, world-renowned. We have scientists from all walks from those agencies that I've mentioned and from partnerships and academic institutions. In fact, the group just published a paper in the Journal of American Water Resources called JAWRA that's a peer-reviewed science paper on climate impacts of the Chesapeake Bay. Just came out at the end of 2022. So there's always more. I'm not going to go through everything, but we do have this cutting-edge science that underpins the work that we do in the Chesapeake Bay. And the main goal that we have in addressing pollution and restoring habitat is about dirt and fertilizer. The dirt and the fertilizer enters the riverways that go out to the Chesapeake Bay. So we call it sediment and nutrients. And those sediments come from agricultural practices. Fertilizers can be manure, dog poop, not so much, but believe it or not, that's a lot of a source of nutrients that go into the water. It can be fertilizers in ag, but also at homes and urban runoff. And so everyone has something they can do to help reduce the amount of sediment that pours into the waterways and the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, which are basically fertilizers, organic or chemical, that fall into the bay. So what the scientists do is model what we expect to come from the basic practices that take place in urban, suburban, and agricultural settings, and then work across the partnership with those states and DC to minimize the amount that people are allowed to pollute and minimize the amount that sediment and fertilizers would go into the water. So we have models and then we monitor. And there are 150 monitoring stations in the watershed. So we check to see how the science is doing, we remodel, and then we respread those allocations of limiting pollution. So that's from the regulatory perspective. Restoration, we're about restoring the habitats. So the reason the Chesapeake Bay program started in 1983 is Hurricane Agnes hit really hard on all those waterways and sent mud and fertilizers and dead zones where there was no oxygen in the water all the way to the bay, and it was a crisis. Not only a crisis for habitat and access to our beautiful lands, but also a crisis economically for the fisheries and other things that sustain economic benefits to all of those states and to our nation. And so this program was started as a partnership, started with just 3 states and then expanded to include the whole watershed. The other area that we work in is that partnership and constantly bolstering the partnership, constantly looking for ways that we can bring people in. And that is at governor level, local communities, local elected officials, individuals, riverkeeper groups. There are so many people who are involved in restoring and protecting the bay. And when we're talking about climate resolutions, we're saying that you could possibly take some actions that not only help mitigate climate change, but also protect the resource that we live in, the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So I guess the last thing I want to say, because I don't want to talk too much, we do have some props here and I'll explain it. But when you think about resolutions on climate, you can think about 3 areas: mitigation, resiliency, and what I like to call inspiring others. So mitigation has to do with reducing the impact that you or those around you have on the climate. So I remember working with Administrator Browner when President Clinton's administration was in, and we were being advised by the Clean Air officials, the Clean Air Office officials, and basically it came down to, Carol Browner said, you mean if everyone stopped using charcoal grills and mowing their lawns, we could actually bring down climate impacts? And the answer was yes. And then she said, that's like baseball and apple pie. We can't possibly come with that kind of regulation where we don't allow charcoal grills. But if people know that, and I learned that there, I went home, we threw out our charcoal grill, and we bought a gas grill so that we're not using charcoal. What I see people in leaf time in the autumn, you have these little postage stamp yards behind us, and 3 guys come out with those gas-powered blowers to blow every leaf into a bag somewhere and take it away. And I'm thinking, why can't we rake? Maybe you can, but those are things that would impact climate, that help you mitigate the impact on climate. If you can just think about the things, and we'll talk more or have some more ideas, but things that you can do to mitigate climate change. The other area that I mentioned is resiliency, and mostly in the Chesapeake Bay, we look at resiliency and our impact on resiliency, and that is, how do we adjust life because of climate change? When it's hotter, when there are more intense, more frequent, and longer lasting storms, and there's flooding. So what can we do to help with resiliency for habitat and species and people? And so one example we have in our house, we have a gravel driveway instead of an asphalt driveway. So when it rains, the water seeps into the groundwater instead of pours down the road and into a storm sewer that goes out to the Chesapeake Bay. So if you already have a concrete or asphalt driveway, that's probably not an action for you. But if you don't, and you have a gravel one and you think, oh, we want to pave this, think again. So there are just actions you can take if you're mindful about your environment, where you can make a difference in either the impact on climate change itself or the impact and the effects of climate change in our everyday. We see just on the Chesapeake Bay, because the temperatures in streams and rivers and the ocean itself are rising, that the species migrate or die. And so a lot of what we do is try to figure out how can we be aware of that. We can't keep the blue crabs where they're supposed to be if it's too hot for them. We find out they actually overwinter now in the bay instead of somewhere else. So you note that, and you note that there really are differences because of climate change. And then the last area is inspiring people. And I was just thinking of this, I'm going to grab my little bag here, how to be inspiring. And it doesn't need to be that you're out giving speeches, but I was at Walgreens the other day and I was like, oh, I have my own bag. And I just thought for a moment, wow, that's just a message right there. I have my own bag. And then I went to Fresh Market. I have my own bag. I also parked in the middle of the parking lot and walked to each of those places instead of moving my car each time I went to a different store. And then my girls gave me these produce bags. So you can get these at Whole Foods and Harris Teeter, and you buy them and you reuse produce bags. So you're not using those plastic bags. And my funny little thing I was thinking too, my funny little thing I was thinking, I'd never use those twisty ties for the produce. I can't understand why you need twisty ties. I just tie it. And you think, how could that matter? But if I start shopping when I'm 20 and say I'm in charge of shopping until I'm 80, and I don't use 5 twisty ties a week for all of that time, there's 15,000 twisty ties I didn't use. Who cares? Say 100 people did that. There's 15 million. Say it just keeps getting bigger, or maybe that was by 1,000. But if 100 people from Emmanuel stopped using twisty ties, maybe there wouldn't be so many. And so the point is mindfulness and is being inspiring, sharing what you do that makes a difference and hoping that it inspires somebody else. The last thing on that gravel driveway, we wanted to upgrade it. And so we brought in a contractor and he's like, oh, we're gonna put a big thick plastic base, and then we'll put we'll put new gravel on top of that, and you'll never have a weed. And we're like, no, we want it to soak in. We want the water to soak into the ground. And he said, nobody cares about the environment, not when it comes to your driveway. So we had a chance to say, well, we do care. There's a storm sewer right down the hill from us. And if it wasn't inspiring to him, he also didn't get the contract. But they're just little steps like that where you can maybe carry a positive message and share that with others, or act in a way that models a behavior. Did you want me to say something about this, the props, or did you have next? So this past summer, the Chesapeake Bay program had this fabulous opportunity to be in the Folklife Festival at the Smithsonian at the National Mall. So we were invited by the Smithsonian Folklife Festival to have a booth, and one of the many things we had was a selfie board. We had this huge selfie board, and the idea was we had all these props and these signs, and that you could make a commitment. So it's really commitment to the Bay, but I thought that they also work for climate change. So we would have people be able to hold up signs and with their selfie board, and using some props and just making it fun, make a commitment, this is what I will do. And there's a selfie that's called Boomerang. Probably no one here knows it, but it's a movable one. So we had people there doing these selfies. We were on National Public Radio about the selfie board at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. And so since we're talking climate commitments, I thought it might be fun to bring these selfies, use this as our backdrop, and make your commitments. And I also have dry erase boards, so you can write your own thing that you want to do. And one of us can take your picture, and you've made your climate commitment, if you want to do that.
So if this is a time where we would like you to start thinking about your own climate resolutions. I have a pencil, we have pencils, lots of them, and unfortunately you would have to write on your bulletin or whatever other piece of paper if you would like to do that, or we want to take some time for that, or I think it would be great to share out loud if there are some things, because I think, there are so many things and everybody is passionate about maybe something different. So while some of your resolutions may be here on these wonderful boards, there may be some others. So I think we could spark a couple of conversations, a couple of resolutions that anybody may have thought of. And if you want a pencil, you've got something, pencils. And then feel free.
Has a
yes.
question.
You were asking for examples, and I would love to hear from all of you about things that you're doing, because I'm keen to learn and to try to do more on an individual level, a household level. One little thing that we've adopted in our household, and it's such a little thing, but it makes us feel good about what we're doing. It's an effort to try to keep little pieces of plastic out of the waste flow. And so what we do is we take empty peanut butter containers or any plastic container, and then we put all the little pieces of plastic, film plastic, flossing plastic, caps. You can be amazed at the number of little pieces of plastic that go in the trash. Put those all in that plastic container that we keep under the sink, put the lid on it when it's full, and put it in the recycling, because they say that so many of these little pieces get lost in the recycling process, and they end up in our water, and they end up hurting fish and what have you. But if we can consolidate that plastic, it's much more likely to get recycled. Little thing, but it feels like one small contribution, so I look forward to hearing from you.
I understand what you're saying, certainly it is. But since those are all things that different polymers, you're mixing them in a single big disc. Is the recycling set up to actually separate?
Or would it be better to put it in the trash?
Or it was just one of these tips that I read about, but I could ask the city about
Yeah, because one thing to realize about the city of Alexandria, a lot of the trash is incinerated, and there's a high heat value in the plastics. And if you have, sorry, Carrie Kelly isn't here because she's a real expert on recycling. If you mix the polymers, it sort of contaminates the whole load, and it all ends up going to trash. So it's worth understanding wherever you live, if it's in Alexandria or we live in Fairfax Station, to know what the recycling can accept and what they can't accept, because in your effort to do good, you could be actually increasing the waste flow.
I have a quick question following up on trash. I live in Alexandria, but I have a good friend in Arlington who always separates her plastics and her recyclables. And she had heard from a friend that they're not recycling the plastic. She actually followed her truck, and they dumped all of the recyclables with the rest of the garbage in Arlington. So I don't know who's doing, I know we take our glass now in Alexandria to a separate place. I feel confident about that. But do you know what's up with the plastic?
I have an opinion to share that does not reflect the agency I work for. Recycling is a mess. There's not good regulations. There's not standards. We don't know what's really recyclable or not. You can ruin a whole load if you put the wrong things in. And you know, I interviewed for a job in the solid waste office once, and I told them that, like, we really do need to put better standards and information out. And I didn't get the job, but we do need to do that. What we have said for a long time, as other EPA employees, I know there was one here, knows, maybe he left, reduce, reuse, recycle. So try and not use, you know, products in the first place that don't easily biodegrade. Try and reduce that amount. Reuse what you can, and then recycle what's left. And so I just really think that's the better standard, because personally I think recycling, it's regulated at the local level, so the cities and counties. There's probably some regulation at the state level, and there's good ideas from the federal level. But it's not clear, and it depends where you live, and it's so hard to tell if this yogurt container can be recycled and if this one can't. And I know Alexandria tries really hard to put out the information on recycling, and still, it's too hard to follow. And so I don't think we do a good job.
I suspect that, the force that keeps up the recycling in Arlington for optics, because everybody wants to be responsible. But it would be good if
So, Martha, you raise a great question. This is where talking to your elected officials counts. That is a huge climate change action that you can take on yourself. It's amazing, I'm learning over the past year and a half through the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. If you gather with your elected officials and you're from a faith community, they listen. So I am seeing these changes happening around our area. And if you're passionate about recycling, I would say if that's something you can do, you can drill down a little bit and talk to your elected officials, because generally in the long run, eventually it will make a difference.
There is a town hall meeting next Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the cafeteria at the high school with our state senators and delegates. All 5 or 6 of them representing this area.
Alexandria or?
No, there's not pictured in there.
Okay. It's Alexandria. Adam Evan, Charlotte Perry, Elizabeth Bennett. They do represent some of our.
Next Saturday morning at 10 o'clock at the high school.
Great, thank you. Some other climate, yes, resolutions.
That started this year is taking my
Let me get so we can hear you.
One thing I started this year is
Oh, I don't think it's on. Let's see. Is it on? Okay.
just getting things like dish liquid in refillable bottles, taking it someplace like I know Mom's does it. Even like I like peanut butter, so I take my glass jar back, and you can just fill it. There's so many products that you don't have to buy a new package every time. It's a little bit more time consuming that way, but something.
Well, this is related to what Celia was saying. I've been trying to think about what I can change, and shampoo bottles is a biggie for me, and also detergent bottles. And my daughter said casually, you know, you can get detergent sheets now. So I found out how to get detergent sheets, and I also, and this was harder, I think, I looked for a company that not only had shampoo bars, but had them for different hair types, because you're not going to use the shampoo if you don't like what it does. And I gave all my girls for Christmas and us shampoo bars and conditioner bars and boxes of detergent sheets for Christmas.
Okay.
I want to make clear, I passionately care about recycling and spent most of my career in waste management, including encouraging recycling. And one of the things I learned, Martha, you're so right, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And if it's not done right, it contributes to the waste problem. And that includes people being overly concerned, overly enthusiastic, and putting things in the bin that are not recyclable. And I didn't mean to say, but it's important. Perhaps if people are interested, we could schedule a future forum hour on the challenges of waste management and recycling, including things like packaging, so we understand what is and isn't recycling, what is helpful, what is harmful in that sort of specific space. I just wanted to make clear that I'm for recycling, but it's got to be done right. Anything with food is a no-no. If you've got a pizza box where there's nothing on the lid, you can cut the lid off, but the bottom that has all the grease, no.
I just wanted to mention one idea, and I had a question also for you, Martha. One thing I think that can maybe get around that problem of recycling not happening, and I heard on NPR the other day that about 10% of items put in those recycling bins nationwide is actually recycled. Because of the difficulty, these problems and many other problems. And the dumping in the landfill is very common, around the country. So in order to avoid that, it's better to not have a thing to recycle in the first place. So we've made some progress on plastic bags in this area. And if you've been to Hawaii, for example, they abolished plastic bags about 5 or 10 years ago. And when you first get there and go shopping, you feel like something's wrong, but then you realize, oh, no plastic bags. And here, I think that a lot of stores are now charging for plastic bags, which is a first step. So I don't use them, and thanks for the tip about the veggie bags, because that's a great idea. Another thing that I find, I look around and see how people live, and see we could really make big progress by not using one-time beverage bottle containers. I see people walking around with plastic water bottles when we have the good fortune to have perfectly clean tap water in our area, and you could just put water in a container and then drink it and bring it home and clean it and use it again.
Yes, like Paul is doing. Use a recycled water bottle.
So I do that.
Recyclable,
and,
reusable.
Soda water, for example. I got so tired of soda water bottles about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I just got myself a SodaStream machine, and I just, use that for soda water, and it cut in half, the volume of the stuff that was going into the bin. So I think. And as far as approaching public officials, any public policy that reduces the amount of non-recyclables that are going into people's daily lives is good, whatever it is. And then my question, I was intrigued by the lawnmower and yard machine argument, and I was wondering if there is a place where one can go to find out what is the different climate impact of, say, an electric lawnmower compared to a two-stroke motor, gas-powered motor, or raking X amount of square yards of leaves compared to blowing it around. That would be interesting.
You know, I don't know. I would say let's Google it and find out. I do know just from working in EPA for so long, you know, when we have questions like that, is it better to have an artificial tree or a real tree? And you look at all that it takes for, you know, both kinds, and you kind of get an answer that it doesn't really matter as long as you keep your fake tree for several years. Pampers or reusable diapers, because of all the chemicals used for diapers, they're kind of the same, not one better than the other. The trick there is toilet train your kids when they're 1.5, you know, and then you're not using anything. So, but you know, everybody has to do what they can do. It's not like each person can do everything, but if we're mindful and we are inspired, and in our case in this church, we're inspired by God. This is God's creation. What can I do that makes a difference today? And be an inspiring, not a judgmental person. And you know, there's a complex problem. We, as the world, went fluorescent, and we all got these fluorescent light bulbs because they were better for the environment. And then we saw the incredible mining pollution in China because of all the mercury that was mined in order to feed those fluorescent light bulbs. And so that's just an example that it's so much more complex than the easy solution. But I think mindfulness and awareness and gratefulness about where we live and the environment that we have and access to everyone is the driving force for making changes.
So one thing I will add to that is that people I have talked to have said, you know, we obviously need to lower our emissions, eliminate as much as possible carbon emissions. Your gas-powered lawnmower does emissions. So if that's enough to make you go, okay, I'm going to switch. But that's something to seriously think about. So we're running out of time. Would you like to? Yes.
I just wanted to address something, a question that came up in my mind as I was listening to this, and you know, climate change, fending it off or whatever, is really more about emissions, and we've been talking about recycling and all this kind of stuff, but that's the resiliency side of this. There's two sides. The climate change is already happening, so we're talking about changes that are going to be occurring to the Earth. How do we make the Earth more resilient? And that's where I think the recycling comes in. One thing I'll mention, Denise has been very active in our on our property of planting native plants, as opposed to you know, maybe beautiful shrubs that come from another part of the world. So what that does is help with resilience, because the wildlife, you know, have evolved in this area, and they're looking for the native plants. They don't know a Japanese, you know, holly from, you know, a Chinese holly, and they won't eat either one, but they'll eat an American holly. So when we talk about, so there's two sides to climate to me. It's one, reducing the future impacts by lowering emissions, and then there's the resiliency side, which is doing whatever you can do right here to keep restore our natural environment.
Thank you. All right.
So I'll just say that people had a total amount of fun on the National Mall. We had 1 million visitors for doing this, and you can come on up and be brave and get your selfies or photos taken if you have your phone. We had a Smithsonian intern all in that whole Folklife Festival for 2 weeks, whose job it was like, you want to do a selfie? And then that person would take the picture. So if you want to make your commitment by doing that, I have wipe away boards, what are they called? You know, reusable boards. And then also, if you choose one of these and you take a photo of it, you can zero in on the QR code and you can learn all about native plants or whatever the topic is. So if you want to be brave, go on up and I'd be happy to take photos.
Yes. Eileen?
I know we're running short on time. You know, it strikes me that in this forum that most of us who are here are pretty much on the same wavelength. We all agree that we want to do things. We want to make kind of ratchet up our level of commitment. I wonder if maybe in addition to a personal commitment or a new resolution that we each want to make, whether we want to think about building on all the good work that you're doing and leading the Creation Care Committee,
Install solar panels. Oh, we did that. Yes.
achievement. But I'm just, I'm challenging us. I'm
Yes.
speaking aloud, thinking aloud here. What can we do collectively that will sort of have a multiplier effect on our impact?
Right, and I think it's a great topic to bring up for the next Creation Care meeting. So,
What we did talk about at one point on vestry, so we have stormwater issue at our Zabriskie Church, if anyone doesn't know that. And we've had floods, and we have a huge asphalt driveway or parking lot, and we were looking at managing the runoff. And I don't really know what ended up happening, but I remember asking, can we manage it so it goes to the ground, not to the storm sewer? So use the ground around our church to absorb water from storms instead of pour it right into the Chesapeake Bay.
I know that we just, I think this past summer, redid the parking lot, but I know that, sorry. Yeah, I know this summer we redid the parking lot, but it's a shame in a way that it's not still a future thing. I guess at some point it will have to be redone. But if anyone has seen the parking at Wolf Trap, they've done permeable parking lots, and they're great, and you don't get muddy. The grass does grow up through the little things, but that would be a great way. Like whenever the next time is we do redo the parking lot, that would be a great model to use.
I have seen that. Right.
Just to answer Martha's question about what was done, we had a landscaping firm install native plants, including a rain garden and underground drainage, but also plants and logs to be stops to control the runoff. But I agree that permeable pavement in the parking lot is the next step to save up our pennies for.
And I will plant a tree.
I was going to just also mention what Paul was saying about, resiliency. Some of our actions actually work for both. If we try to reduce our use of things that are made from fossil fuels or fossil-based products like oil, if the demand for that goes down, then we're also helping mitigate. And then if we're reusing or recycling, that helps get it out of the environment. So a lot of the things that we can do, like planting trees, helps keep sediment out of the Chesapeake tributaries into the bay, because I grew up in Kansas and I thought everyone knew this, but we do have some rather large arguments with agricultural communities about planting trees as buffers before you get to streams, and also it keeps the winds from eroding your soil. And it also reduces temperature because it creates shade. And so it does all these things that help with the environment and also help with the habitat. And so taking some action that you think might be small might do a lot more than you realize.
Well, I have a 2023 climate resolution. I pledge to begin composting. I've been wanting to do it. I'm going to do it, and you can all hold me to it. Yes. Does anybody want to share a resolution? Yes.
So I, this wonderful band in October, 89 years old, and he was talking about picking up litter, and he had a little video on all of the, hundreds of pounds of litter he had picked up and with his group over the previous month. And so anyway, I told him that he had inspired me to go buy a grabber. So I bought a grabber. So this year, when I'm walking, I always pick up recyclable stuff, but I never used to pick up litter, but now I'm going to pick up litter. So that'll be my resolution.
Julie, here you go.
So it's 1 o'clock. We started late. But thank you for all of you for being here. And, if you have ideas or you want to share more, if you want your pictures taken here in front of the banner, please, with your resolution, please feel free. Either Martha or I will take your picture. And thank you. Is anything else you'd like to say?
I think that's it. Just thank you. Remember to be inspiring about climate. I think that's one of the most important thing, inspiring, not judgmental. And do what you can do. It's not necessarily the thing another person can do. But if we all do something, I think we can make a big difference.
Yes.
We might inspire some other people.
Great. Yes, good idea. Good idea. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.